electric cars. Lee Berger is going to be talking to us about electric cars today. He's a longtime owner of electric cars and a longtime congregation member, and he has an awful lot to share with us. And I also just want to make sure that I put in a plug for this coming Friday night. We're on Zoom now, but this coming Friday night, Art Lebowski will be live and in person as part of our Speaker Shabbat, presenting about volcanoes. And for those of us who have heard presentations about volcanoes from Art before, this is going to be a real treat to have him back again for more volcanic activity. So from electricity to volcanoes this week. All right. And I will ask if everybody, if you're not talking, if you could mute yourself, because there has been a little bit of an echo, that would be awesome.
Right. And just remember, Ruth, not to move don't put things up while you're screen sharing.
All right. Is it my turn? No.
Yes, Lee.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure that I can be heard. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. I'd especially like to thank a couple of family members who have tuned in, and I appreciate that. I'm going to start off by acknowledging the presumptuous title of this presentation, Why You'll Soon Be Driving an Electric Car. After all, who am I to be telling you what you'll be driving soon? I have to admit that I did choose this title very deliberately, because I genuinely believe that most American drivers will be buying electric cars in the next 4 or 5 years, and that would be a big change. But I hope to convince you that not only is this nothing to worry about, but it's actually something to look forward to. By the way, are there any people here? Actually, I know a little bit of the answer to this question, but I might not know it all. Is there anyone here today who already is driving an electric car, either a hybrid or a 100% electric?
Well, I've driven a couple before.
Oh, okay, Daniel. And
I drive a hybrid, but it's not a plug-in hybrid.
well, that still counts. It's got an electric component to it. And go ahead.
I've had an electric car for 3 years, and it's been great.
And
The Eisers have had 3 hybrids.
oh, wonderful. Okay. So any of you who want to jump in at any time and add anything as we go along, that would be terrific. All right. In the meantime, I am going to start with 2 reassurances, 3 definitions, and 1 disclaimer. All right, so first, the reassurances. First one is that you don't have to be either a tech person or a car person to drive an electric car. I've been driving an all-electric car for 8.5 years now, and anybody who knows me even a little bit knows that I am far from a cutting-edge kind of guy. I still mostly use a landline phone, complete with answering machine, and I'm proud to say I still have an impressive collection of videotapes and a VCR to play them on. And as far as being a car person is concerned, I cheerfully admit that I don't know a radiator from a carburetor. And I have to say that that's one big reason that I drive an electric car, because it doesn't even have most of the parts that I don't understand. Reassurance number 2, you do not have to learn how to drive an electric car. Electric cars are just like regular cars, and you charge them just like you do anything else. You plug them in. When they're charged, you unplug them. And there's not even a way you can overcharge them or otherwise mess them up. All right, so now for the 3 definitions. There are 3 kinds of electric cars: hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and all electrics. Hybrids have a small electric battery that trades off with a gasoline engine to give you quite a bit better mileage than a gas car itself would. Toyota Prius, like the Eisers have, or have had 3 of actually, is the most common hybrid. Plug-in hybrids have a larger electric battery that can power your car separately from the gas engine. The Prius Prime is a plug-in hybrid, for example, and it can go about 25, 30 miles without using any gas at all. If you go farther than that, your gas engine will kick in automatically and take you as far as any other car would on a tank of gas. The advantage to the plug-in hybrid is that if you typically drive no more than 25 miles a day, you can plug in and recharge at the end of that day and never have to use any gas at all until you need to take a long trip. All electric cars, like the, by that I mean not every electric car, I mean cars that are all electric, like 100%, like the Tesla and the Nissan Leaf that I drive, don't use any gas at all. They couldn't if they wanted to because there's no gas tank. They all run completely on electricity, like a golf cart or a phone for that matter. And like your cell phone, you plug it in to recharge it. And 90% of all electric car charging is done at home. And then the rest of it is done at public charging stations across the country and around the world. So before I go any further, any questions about the three types of electric cars? All right. So now for the disclaimer.
May I have a question for you?
Oh, a question. Okay, because I can't always see. So just jump right in.
The presentation, are you just going to go through the slides or you're just going to talk? Because there's like, I see slide, but it's slide 1, and I'm sure you kind of like have something on those slides.
Oh, yes, Irene, yes. Thank you for asking. In fact, I think there are about 28 of those slides, and I haven't, we're still on number 1. So you haven't missed anything there. And the others will be coming up. And when you hear me say something like, next slide, please, then you'll know that Ruthie Iser is bringing up the next one. Okay? All right. So the disclaimer. So I have to tell you that electric cars are most likely to work for you if you have a garage or a carport. That's because it takes a lot longer to charge an electric car than it does to fill up with gas. And that's why about 90% of electric car charging is done at home, because you can do other things while you're charging. So now let's take a quick survey. Please raise your hand, or if you're not on camera, just say out loud, this is very informal here, yes or no, whether you have either a garage or a carport where you live.
No.
No.
Okay, and of course, I cannot see everyone, but has anyone raised their hand here for garage or carport? Yes, okay, all right, all right, so it's a mix. Okay, and that's about what I figured. So, of course, having a garage or a carport makes it more convenient, but without a place to charge at home, you do have some other options, and we'll talk about them later. So please don't go away. First, though, I'm going to give a 2-minute history of electric cars. And when I was preparing this talk, I was surprised to learn that electric vehicles have been around since the 1880s. Oh, next slide. Yes, we're already there. Thank you, Ruth. Yes, that's the 1880s. In fact, by 1900, about a third of all electric cars, I'm sorry, a third of all cars sold in the United States were electric. Here's an ad from 1910. And there it is, the aristocrats of motordom. That's not a word you get to say very often, motordom. But I'm thinking that maybe you can see why electric cars would be appealing, and not just to the society woman, as it says here, meets every need of the society woman. If you think about it, back in 1910, all regular cars, like a Model T, had to be hand cranked, and they were loud and they were smelly. And That was not the case with the Berger here. It was much cleaner and quieter. And if you can see the small print, I guess depending on your device, you may or may not be able to see it. But what it says here is that this car, the Berger Electric, can go 70 to 100 miles on a charge. That was a long way to go in 1910. So what happened? Why didn't our grandparents and parents get to drive Berger Electric or some other kind of electric car? 2 words: cheap gas. Oil was struck in places like Texas and Oklahoma, and gasoline got cheaper and cheaper. By 1935, gas was about 18 cents a gallon. Standard Oil had built gas stations across the country, and electric cars had disappeared. Well, it took a long time, but finally, electricity is cheaper than gasoline. Battery technology has advanced dramatically, and the electric car is back. In the year 2000, the Prius became the first electric hybrid sold in the United States. Now, that's gasoline-powered car that has an electric motor to boost the mileage. 8 years later, 2008, the Tesla Roadster came out, and that was the first all-electric car. The only problem was it started at $109,000. 2 years later, though, the Nissan Leaf came out, and that was the first reasonably affordable all-electric car. The Leaf at $29,990. As for range, the Leaf had a range of 73 miles, about the same as the 1910 Berger Electric. So I don't know if that says more about the Leaf or whether it says more about how the Berger was ahead of its time. But we've fortunately come a long way in the 11 years since the Leaf came out, and you can see that on the chart, the table that Ruth has put up here. So that's the end of our history lesson, right? At this moment, you can see that there are about a dozen cars on this chart, and there are actually, I just put up a sampling, there are about 20 electric car models available in the United States now. And here's a list of some of the more popular ones being sold. And if you look at the second column, you can see that with the exception of the BMW, for some reason, all of these can go between 200 and 400 miles on a charge. The next column shows you that they can go from 0 to 60 pretty quickly too. And just for reference, I had to look this up, but a Toyota Camry goes from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 7.5 seconds. And so you can see that just about all these cars, these electric ones, can do at least that. And of course, there's a Tesla here. I don't know if you can see my pointer here, but there's a Tesla that can go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. And of course, that's just our friend Elon Musk showing off a little bit. Last column, all of these cars can go at least 90 miles an hour, which is certainly enough for me to get down Manavon Street on the way to the synagogue. So I think the speed's pretty good too. All right, so next are some pictures of a sampling of electric vehicles, electric cars and trucks available either now or coming within the next year. So on the bottom left of each slide, you can see the price of each car, at least the base price, and when that car is available, either now or shortly. So Ruth, do I have the ability to scroll or not? If not, I'll just say next slide, please. So let's do it that way. So we're starting here with some, there are about a dozen or so of these. We'll start with some of the more upscale models. So you can go to the next slide. BMW, yep, next slide, please. Yeah, Cadillac, next slide. Okay, this is a little more reasonably priced, the Chevy. Next slide. Yep, pickup trucks as well. Next slide. Here's my favorite, the Hummer. I don't know, maybe I'll find out to my surprise that there are a lot of eco-conscious Hummer drivers out there, but GMC seems to think so. So there you have it. Next slide, please. Honda. Next. Hyundai. Next slide. Yes, Kia. Next slide. Nissan. Next. Subaru. Next. Tesla, of course, and there are several Tesla models, including this is the base model. And next slide. There's that Elon Musk again, and that's an interesting looking truck. Next slide. Toyota, that's I think a handsome looking Toyota. And the next. And the last slide, please. All right. So you can see that there are a lot of choices coming our way, and not a moment too soon, I think, because right now electric vehicles make up about only 2% of the car market in the United States. That's less than half as quickly as they're catching on worldwide, and less than 1/5 as quickly as they're being sold in Europe. The next slide gives you an idea of where we are in the United States compared with some of those places. So,
Lee,
yes.
let me just say, I think I heard that, I'm not sure if it's Norway or Sweden.
You are right. Norway is at the bottom of this. You're exactly right.
They're selling, yeah,
It's unbelievable to me. 3/4 of the cars sold in Norway in 2020 were electric cars. Nearly 3/4. And Norway is a big, because of the North Sea oil discoveries, they're a big oil producing country. So they actually had to make a very conscious effort, a conscious decision to decide that, that the earth was more important than their oil industry. And that they have led the way. So United States is at 2.2 around the world. It is more than double that. California is certainly doing its part. And Europe, what is that? 5 times as much as the United States. So they're coming along there, and Norway is leading the way. So the 2.2 in this country, I believe, is going to change soon. And that's not just my opinion. The president of the United States has made a deal with US automakers to make 50% of new cars electric by 2030. So that's a little more than 8 years. Several other companies worldwide are going to beat that 50%, with Volvo, for example, going 100% electric by 2030, Volkswagen by 2027. Even Rolls-Royce is bringing out an electric car called the Silent Shadow. And if I can see the next slide, please.
Lee, I just wanted to mention regarding Norway,
Yes.
most of their electricity comes from hydropower, and the balance is like thermal and other things. So they actually don't use a lot of fossil fuels for electricity in Norway.
I see. So they export some oil, but they don't use it, and I think that's pretty impressive. This is for my son Daniel. Our son. We want to make sure that you drive in style. So this is the silver. What did I call it? The Silent Shadow. This is the Rolls-Royce prototype, and it's only $380,000. Though you might want to bump it up to 400,000, because I don't know if that includes a radio, air conditioning, that sort of thing.
As much as I'd like a house, I think I want that more.
Good move. So you can now see, I hope, that electric vehicles will be widely available in many shapes, sizes, and price ranges very soon. But that still raises a critical question, which is, should you buy one? to help answer that, let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of owning an electric car. So before I get to that, well, can you back up for a second to stick with what we had here? Because I just want to ask, does anyone have any questions or comments before we jump into the pros and cons? Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's start with the pros, and I'm going to give you 6 of them, and you still don't have to go to the next slide yet, because I think that's for number 5, I think, or might be number 3. Well, I'll let you know when I get there. Number 1, though, is electric cars are better for the environment, and you probably know this already, so I'm just going to spend a minute or so on specifics. 29% of US greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation, making it the largest source of climate change pollution in this country. 100% electric vehicles, meaning the non-hybrids, don't use any gas, of course, and they cut tailpipe emissions to 0. Now, some of you may be thinking, he said tailpipe emissions. What about the electricity you use to charge the car? And that is true. That does create some greenhouse gases. But unless you drive in West Virginia, or actually live in West Virginia, where they still get 90% of their electricity from coal, your electricity is going to be much cleaner coming from an electric vehicle. Pennsylvania gets about 20% of its electricity from coal, and the rest comes from much less producing sources such as natural gas, nuclear, hydroelectric, solar, and wind. But what makes electric cars even cleaner is that they use less than 1/3 as much electricity to go the same distance as a gas-powered car. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but the bottom line is that when you drive an all-electric car or truck, you're doing one of the most effective things a person can do on a daily basis to fight climate change. All right, number 2. Electric vehicles now cost about the same to buy as the gas-powered car, and they're going to get cheaper. There aren't too many products that you can say that about. When I bought my first Nissan Leaf, this is our second now, I bought the first one in 2013. It cost $29,990. But now, 8 years later, a Leaf is $28,000, $2,000 less. And that's because lithium-ion batteries that power the car have gotten cheaper and cheaper over the years. I was stunned when I Googled last week, average price of a new car in the United States. Does anyone want to take a guess about what the average price paid for a new car in this country was in 2020? No penalty for guessing wrong. Anybody
Low
can-
30s?
Yeah, well, I would have thought that too. If this statistic I read is correct, it was close to $42,000. And I think that has to include all the extras that people often get with their cars these days. And I was also surprised to learn that the average car is not a car. The average car bought in this country today is an SUV or a truck. They outsell and SUVs are technically on truck platforms, and that's why they're not listed. They're actually, that helps them get exempt from certain mileage fuel requirements. So they're technically called trucks, but with all the bells and whistles, $42,000. The Tesla.
Very few people actually buy their cars these days.
So are you saying they finance them?
Yes, they
Yes.
don't.
Well, that's a very
buy them
good-
outright.
Yes, that's a very good point. Partly because of the price, and as you know, there's been shortages of cars and everything. But this was 2020, and it was not just because I think that price has been driven up somewhat by supply chain problems and things of that nature. But what we're also noticing is instead of a 3 or a 5-year lease, people or financing the car, people are financing them for 8 years because they cost so much. So the base Tesla is 39,990. So that's in the, certainly in the ballpark of 42,000, but just about every car maker now either has an electric model out or coming out in the next year that'll be between $30,000 and $40,000. And so that certainly brings us into the ballpark. And one other little detail here that's not so little. There's a federal tax credit of about $4,500 for plug-in hybrids and $7,500 for all electric, 100% electric cars. So what that means is that whatever you spend on a 100% electric vehicle, as long as you owe at least $7,500 in taxes at the end of the year, you'll effectively pay $7,500 less than the base price of that car. Are there any questions about that tax credit and car prices before I move on? All right, so that brings me to advantage number 2, which, it's one thing to buy a car, it's another to drive it. So,
Lee,
yes.
can I just say one other thing? I mean, I think because when I got my Tesla in 2016, not only did I get that $7,500 federal rebate, Pennsylvania, I think, had a state rebate as well, or tax credit.
Yes, that's a good point. Had a direct rebate. Now, I am not sure. That was the case also when we got the Leaf. It was so there was a rebate, and that was a wonderful thing. I am not sure it still exists. We have a legislature that might have let that expire, but I'm not positive.
Yeah,
It's
I'm not
certainly
sure.
worth checking out. Certainly worth checking out.
Just wanted to bring that point up.
Thank you for mentioning that. I had forgotten about that. So now the question is, what about driving the car? So I'm happy to say, though, advantage number 3 can come up now, and you can put that Windows sticker up, because electricity is a whole lot cheaper than gasoline. And that's something I mentioned under number 1, that it takes a lot less of it to power a car. And to show you how much less, let's take a look at the Environmental Protection Agency window sticker for gas and electric cars. So the first one up here is for a gas-powered car, and the average in this country is 26 miles per gallon. I think that's actually a law now that the average has to be about there. And let's compare that to an all-electric vehicle. The next slide, please. So as you can see, that's about 99, and they call it MPGE, by the way, because when you think about it, there are no gallons, no miles per gallon here, so it's miles per gallon equivalent. But your mileage in an electric car is almost 4 times better, because electricity is cheaper, and because electric motors are just much more efficient than internal combustion engines. And so it takes a lot less electricity to send you the same distance as it would comparably with gas. And so that brings us to the annual fuel cost. So can you go back to the previous slide, please? There we go. So according to the EPA, your annual fuel cost is going to be $2,150 with a gas car, and then forward again to an electric car, just $600 with an electric one. Now there is some small print here, and it's actually literal small print. It's in the black here, so I'm not sure you'll be able to see it, but if you can back up again to the previous slide, 2100, what's happening here is that the EPA is saying the numbers are based, and I'm reading here in the black at the bottom, cost estimates are based on 15,000 miles per year at $3.70 a gallon. Now, I did some homework here and found out the average Pennsylvania driver drives about 11,000 miles a year, and that was actually a couple years ago, non-pandemic. What takes the national average up to about 15 is places like Texas and Wyoming and Alaska, where it just takes a longer time and you have to go further to get any place you want to go. But in Pennsylvania, it's 11,000 miles a year. And as far as 370 a gallon, gas prices are rising, but last time I checked, they were about what, $3.25, $3.30 a gallon. So we're not quite at 370. So to be conservative, I cut that 2,150 a year by 30%. And that makes it $1,500 a year. Even at that, that's still 2.5 times more than the $600 that you'll spend with an all-electric car. 1,500 minus 6 is 900. And that means that even conservatively speaking, you'll save $900 on fuel every year you own an electric vehicle. Any questions or comments on this? Anyone confused about it or think that maybe the numbers are unrealistic? All right, let's go to number 4 then. And this is, I must say, my favorite because maintenance and fixing cars and just the headaches involved in that sometimes can make a difference in your ownership of a car. Maintenance is much less frequent and much less expensive with an electric car. One of the happiest discoveries I have made over the years is that an electric car is much cheaper to maintain than a gas-powered car. There are just so many fewer moving parts to an electric motor than to an internal combustion engine. Rarely, if ever, does anything go wrong with the electric motor or the batteries. In 8.5 years, I've never needed anything repaired on either of my electric cars that was motor or battery related. Well, actually, that's not true, is it? Because Ruth Yeiser will testify here that actually my Leaf has not only, of course, the batteries that make the car go, but a regular battery that runs the lights and the heat and the air conditioning, that sort of thing, the wipers. And that one died in the CBJ parking lot last year in the middle of a JRA pickup. But that can happen with any car with a 6-year-old battery, so I'm not going to count that one. Of course, you still need to, replace the tires and the brakes like you would on any other car. But even with the brakes, thanks to something called regenerative braking, an electric car starts slowing itself down before you apply the brakes. And that means less brake wear. You're not actually applying the brake pads to the rotors, I guess that is. So that it winds up that brakes on electric cars only have to be replaced about half as often as on regular cars. But here's my favorite part, I think. Electric vehicles need no oil changes because there's no oil. No engine antifreeze to add because there's no engine. No fuel filter to replace because there's no fuel. Well, unless you count electrons, I guess. No spark plugs or spark plug wires to change. No muffler, no tailpipe, and no catalytic converter. No emissions inspections because there are no emissions. No alternator. No $800 fuel pump if that goes bad. And no timing belt. That can be, I think I've spent in the past $900. At 60,000 miles, I think just about any car has to have a timing belt replaced, but there's no timing belt either. And that's why, according to a 2020 study by Consumer Reports, the lifetime maintenance costs of a typical electric vehicle are less than half those of a gas-powered car. And that is not counting the money saved on gas. And here's a slide. Next slide sums that up. Yes, somebody wanted to.
Just one thing. One thing I have noticed with my Tesla, which I have, it's number one, a very heavy car. It's over 5,000 pounds, I believe, because of the battery pack in it. So they go through tires a little faster than equivalent type cars. But all the other stuff, like you say, I mean, I've had no expenses for 3 years of owning my car with 36,000 miles on it. So,
Okay, that's good to know. And I'm not sure if that situation with the tires applies to all electric cars or not, but that even, but that is good to know regardless. And I think Chuck Yiser mentioned in the chat that they've gone, what, 100,000 miles between brake changes. And that's a whole lot better than with a conventional car. Okay, so advantage number 5, and I'm moving faster now, so these will not take quite as long. Electric cars are especially good for local driving, which is, I think, what most of us do. As you probably know, gas-powered cars get better mileage on the highway than they do in the city. Well, EVs are just the opposite. Thanks again to this regenerative braking, the car's battery is recharging. That's what the regenerative part is. The car's battery is recharging every time you brake. So your range is actually better in stop and go driving. Your mileage is better in stop and go driving than on the highway. That brings us to the last advantage. Electric cars are very quiet. In fact, they're essentially silent. That does take a little getting used to. In the beginning, I remember having to check the dash to make sure that I had turned the car on. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, Nissan actually had to add a little humming sound effect that plays at low speeds so that people could hear you coming down the street. When you're idling and you're not coming down the street at all, the car is completely silent. And it's not using any power at all. It's not as if, you know, the gas is still burning. When I used to get stuck in traffic, that's one of the things, one of my little pet peeves. I'd be thinking about the fossil fuels I was burning and not even going anywhere. But now that's not happening. So those are the 6 major examples of advantages, 6 major advantages of electric cars. Would anyone like to say anything before we move from this carefree utopia I have created to the drawbacks of electric cars?
Lee, just one other thing that I know a lot of people who own electric cars, if they have the ability to put solar panels on their roof, they're essentially not even paying for the electricity to charge the car.
Oh, that's, yeah, absolutely, yes. So that's pretty cool. And certainly better for the planet too.
I was going to say, actually, when you do have somebody come out, if you're thinking about solar, they will ask you whether you want to charge a car, make sure your panels and everything is sized accordingly.
Nice.
So
Okay.
if that's something that you think is in your future and you're thinking of getting solar panels, that gets factored into the design.
That's for your house.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm still waiting for that day, Ruth, when the solar panels will be on top of the car and it'll charge itself.
Well, that's what Chuck is talking about. Chuck Epstein was talking about, is that there are people who have solar
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
solar panels on their car.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
But I did just want to, just throw a little bit of, a little bit of a damper. Our original Prius, the battery did die. And when you look at a dashboard and it looks like a Christmas tree lit up, that's what happens. And it was very expensive to replace the battery. Now, once the battery was replaced, Toyota was pretty good about giving us money towards our next car because they didn't want to lose us from buying a Prius again. And the new battery did actually get better mileage than the original battery, but batteries do die. And they do tend to die, at least for our car. It died right after the warranty in Pennsylvania ran out. If we had had the car in California, the warranty still would have been in effect.
Right.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
roughly 120, 125,000.
Oh, okay. Miles. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
And what year was your Prius this happened to?
It was a 2006.
2006.
Oh, okay. So this is pretty early in the game. Okay.
Yeah, it was a Gen 2, and then we got a Gen 3 battery pack in it,
I see. Okay.
brand new from the dealer.
All right. Well,
There
actually,
are-
thank you for mentioning that. Although I'm not going to talk about Priuses in particular, I am going to talk about battery replacement. So that's actually our third and last drawback to electric cars. So it is worth mentioning.
I would add one thing.
Yes.
I don't yet own one of these, but a lot of the conversation today is focused on the environmental, et cetera. And obviously, I'm not an expert in how this whole thing played out, although I have been reading a lot about the cars coming out. But it seems you have, two not necessarily divergent groups of people. You have the people who purchase them for the environmental reasons. And then Tesla came along and they sort of made it known that people would spend $100 and some thousand on a car if it was super fast. And so now electric cars, in my mind, have the other group, which is people who buy them for number one reason being rapid acceleration. I don't know how much they care about the environmental part. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Certainly those two things can fully 100% overlap. But now, the two things are coming to the middle where you're getting cars at the lower end of the price point, 40,000, 60,000 instead of 120,000, still with excellent acceleration times. And my assumption is there's a group of people out there who are looking at these cars, not only because they're popular in the news and not only because that's where everybody's going, but simply because of the rapid acceleration on driving. And that's their number 1, 2, and 3 reason for purchasing.
That's a good point, Jonathan. And it's, I guess the way our car manufacturers and maybe the way I'm going to look at it too, is that anything that gets somebody to buy something that's better for the environment, even if they're doing it for the wrong reasons or not a reason that I would choose, that's probably a good thing. But it's true that we're going to have to, if this change is going to happen, it's going to have to appeal to as many people as possible for as many reasons as possible. I'm hoping that one of the things that I'm showing here is that no matter what your motivation is and no matter what your price range is, if there's going to be an electric car available to you, if you can afford buying a car, which is not an automatic thing for some people, of course, but you're going to be able to do it if you choose to do it.
Lee, let me just say one other thing about Tesla, because that's the company I have been following greatly for a lot of years. That yes, they came out with super expensive cars to begin with in trying to figure out how to make electric cars. But last quarter, they sold, I think, approximately 240,000 vehicles around the world, of which only, I think, less than 10,000 of them were their higher priced cars. Most of them was the Model 3 and the Model Y, which are their lower priced vehicles. And, that's where the future is in making affordable cars for everybody.
Oh, okay.
But their direction, they learned with the expensive cars because people would buy them and spend big money on them, and that would support their business so that they could learn how to make the lower price cars.
Oh, okay, that's worth mentioning. And
anyway, let me just say one other thing. I apologize, but I do have to run.
No, that's
It's
fine.
been great, though. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think it's probably kind of like General Motors. They put out the Corvette, and they can certainly earn a lot more money on their Corvettes than they can on their Chevys.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting that people are starting to buy electric cars for all kinds of reasons. Okay, so range, that's the first disadvantage that I think is worth talking about. I'm going to mention just 3 potential drawbacks, and each one is important to think about, and only you can decide whether it's going to be a deal breaker for you. I'm hoping to show you that each one of them is less than a problem, though, than it might seem at first. And the range is the first one, which is the distance a car can go between fill-ups, so charges in this case. So not long ago, range was the big problem with electric cars. The average gasoline-powered car can go about 400 miles between fill-ups, even more. The 2015 Leaf that I'm driving now has a range of 84 miles. But battery technology has advanced very quickly so that the 2021 Leaf, so in other words, 6 years later, the Leaf is at 226, up from 84. And the average, the typical electric car now is at about 250. In another 2 or 3 years, it's projected to be 350 or more. And there's a Tesla Roadster out there, even though Tesla is wants to make sports cars. They also have a version that can get 620 miles worth of range. So this is technologically possible, and very soon, I think, range will not be an issue. In fact, that's why my talk here is focusing mostly on 100% electric cars, because rather than hybrids. I think that hybrids are really going to end up being, and the Eisers may or may not agree, I don't know, because you've owned 3 of them, and maybe, and I haven't owned any, but I kind of think that hybrids will end up being a temporary bridge until the range of a typical electric car is exactly or more than a comparable gas-powered car, and people get more used to the idea of electric cars. A hybrid uses a gas tank and an electric motor, and that just strikes me as a temporary situation. That said, there are some factors that affect your mileage in an electric car, and of course, with any car, if you're driving up if you're driving up a steep hill, or you're driving just really fast, that does affect your mileage. But with electrics, your range also drops, and fairly considerably. I've seen estimates as much as 20% when the temperature gets cold outside. And by that, I mean, 40 degrees or below. Doesn't do anything to the car. It doesn't, affect the ability of the car to go or anything, or the speed it can go. It just means that, like with any battery, cold affects its efficiency. And of course, when you're putting on the air conditioning or the heat, whatever, that also affects the mileage a little bit. But of course, there's a big readout on the dashboard that tells you exactly how many miles of range you have left at any time. So it's not as if you're going to be caught by surprise or anything. When my Leaf, for example, even gets down to about 18 miles of charge, I get reminded, oh gosh, I get reminded about 5 different ways that it's time to recharge. In fact, if Ruth is able to help me here, I'm going to show you a picture of the dashboard of my Leaf when that happens. Oh, that was quick. Thank you very much. So if you look in the top left here, you'll see these exclamation points and triangles, and those come on when your range gets down. If you look here, it says battery level is low, so that's a clue. If you look at this little gauge here, I guess you could call it, you can see that if the car were fully charged, this blue and white would be at the top here. So this is just a visual telling you that, oh, you're getting down in the red range here. It also has a little icon of a gas pump with an electric plug in it. And thank you, Ruth. And the last thing here is it shows you exactly how many miles you have left. So I purposely drove the car down to just 11 miles left. And Ruth, if you could just turn on the 10-second video now, you'll see that that 11 starts flashing too. And there's even a little beep that starts. It only beeps once, but it tells you that your battery level is low. And although I haven't driven my car this far yet, if you take it down towards 0, a little turtle icon will appear on screen. So there really is less danger of running out of charge, I think, than there is of running out of gas in a regular car. You really get notified in a lot of different ways. And in fact, there's even something called, you know what, I'm forgetting what it's called. There's a range buffer. Yes, there's in every electric car out there. There is a cushion of 10 to 15 miles so that when you're down to 0 on your readout, you can still go another 10 or 15 miles. The car makers have really gone out of their way to reassure people that this is not a problem. All right, second drawback, charging time. And this is a big one in some ways, but it has turned out to be actually no big deal for me, and I will explain why. But I should tell you that there's no getting around the fact that charging an electric car takes a lot longer than the 5 minutes that it takes to get gas. There are 3 levels of chargers out there, and even the fastest takes a half hour or so. But I hope to show you that that really isn't the problem that it appears to be. First, there's some specifics. Level 1 charging is what uses a regular 120 volt electrical outlet like the ones that we all have in our homes. That one, if you've got one of these in your carport or your garage or even on the back of, attached to the back of your house, if you installed one of those, you're ready for an electric vehicle. But, and here's the big caveat here. If you do that level 1 charging, it's going to take you a half a day to charge your car. This is called trickle charging, and it can take 12 hours or more to charge from 0, or at least almost 0. You don't want to be down to 0 if you can help it, to 250 miles or whatever your car's full range is. So it can take quite a while. And I know this sounds ridiculously slow, but once I explain the other 2 levels very quickly, I'm going to come back and tell you why I and my family have been charging our electric car exactly this way for 8.5 years, and it has been fine. Level 2 charging happens when you pay about $1,000 to have a 240 volt outlet installed in your garage or your carport or the wall of your house. Now that's an outlet like you may already have for a stove or a dryer, water heater. They all use 240 because they draw a bit more power, and that's what you would need for your car as well. You'd also need a level 2 charger to plug into that outlet. So, but those are also very widely available. Can get them from Amazon and lots of other places. They cost another $500 or so. So for $1,500, you're increasing your charging power from about 4 miles of range per hour with a regular outlet to 20 to 30 miles of range per hour. That's level 2 charging. Now there is something called level 3, and that's what you get when you're out and about. Level 3 charging gets you at least 80% charge in a half an hour, but you'll generally see that at charging stations rather than homes because it costs about $50,000 to install. So now I imagine you're thinking, as I did at first, I don't have hours to charge my car every week. But here is the revelation, I guess, that I should have thought of, but didn't. And that is, you don't have to be with your car to charge it. It's not at all like pumping gas. When you're done driving for the day, you plug in the car and you forget about it. You watch TV, you read a book, you sleep, and your car is fully charged when you wake up the next morning, just like your phone. And here's another thing that was a pleasant surprise for me. As long as you're using an electric vehicle as a commuter car and not taking it on long trips, which is what most of us do most of the time, it doesn't need to be fully charged anyway. As I mentioned, my 2015 Leaf has a range of 84 miles. I fully expected when I got it that by 2021, I'd be trading it in for something else, but that got more range. But I drive a little less than maybe 11,000 miles a year than the average Pennsylvania driver does, but let's go with 11,000. That comes out to 30.3 miles a day. And so that regular old electrical outlet allows me to get home at the end of the day, plug in my car, and by the time I wake up the next morning, I have more than enough, 50 miles or so, 80 miles to go through the next typical day. Now, that said, not every day is a typical day. And if you're going to go to the shore, for example, and drive 100 miles, you would need to have some options. And so here are quickly the options. And one is if you're more than a one-car household, as most households I think are, you can do what the Berger family does, which is just take the other car when you're going on a long trip. But we've got a 10-year-old Subaru for that. But if you don't have that option, there are a couple of others. You could go to a public charging station and get fully charged in, as I said, about a half an hour. And they're all over the place. For example, at the King of Prussia Mall, at Nissan dealers, at the Ford dealer down on Nutt Road, all plazas at the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And they're a lot cheaper. Well, actually, most of them, I should say many of them are free as a service, and some are subsidized by the government as well. But even at full price, it'll charge you about $9 to fully charge your car. That's how much it costs. And that's a whole lot cheaper than buying a tank of gas. And of course, even if you don't want the inconvenience of going to a charging station, you do always have that option of paying the $1,500 or so, get a level 2 charger at home. And I hope you've already seen that you save many thousands of dollars on gas, $900 a year, and maintenance by owning an electric car. So that $1,500 certainly is more than offset in the long run.
Lee, just as a quick point, they're showing on Google, they're showing a charging station in Phoenixville. And the interesting review comment was that non-EV cars are often taking all the spaces. And the other aspect they noted was the charging is free, but you must pay for parking. And this person just got a $20 fine as they were not aware of the parking charge while getting charged.
Oh, okay. Well, that's helpful to know. I've already put in the chat, actually, and you could Google this yourself if you wanted to, but there are interactive maps all across the internet, plugshare.com, chargehub.com, greencars.com. They all have interactive maps that will tell you where the charging stations are in your area. And there are quite a lot of them. And actually, there are going to be a lot more very soon. Once Congress gets around to passing that infrastructure bill that we've heard so much about lately, there are a couple of $1 billion being dedicated to building thousands of more charging stations across the country. You may remember that I mentioned US automakers had that deal with the president, and there was of course, deals are two-way streets, and the president in return promised generous federal subsidies to build those charging stations across the country. So I've been talking a lot here.
The limitation on the number of miles that you can drive is basically the reason I don't have an electric car, because I'm just one person with one car. Like actually very, very many people, families just have one car. If you
yes, and that is
an economic reason for that. And so if I have one car, it's not practical for me to get an electric for, because I'm going to have long trips unless I rent a car, which is not a bad idea. If you're going to go on a long trip, leave your electric car at home and take and rent a car.
Well, that certainly is an option. What I'm hoping to get across here is that this is not really going to be a problem very soon. The average electric car right now can take you 250 miles on a charge. And what I know some people have done, for example, I said going to the shore, or going to New York, going, wherever you need to go within there, you can, if you're staying for a while, you take your charging, cord with you, hotels, any place with an outlet that I've even, when I was at work, I even ran a cord from just a regular outlet to my car. And you can, while you're there, we're on your vacation or whatever your trip is, you can charge your car overnight and be fully charged at the following morning. But even if you don't do that, within the next couple of years, electric cars will go every bit as far as a gas-powered car does. So, and again, with these charging stations across the country, there are 43,000 of them across the country now, and that will be doubling very soon, because there's this agreement with the president and the car companies that they're going to get money to build charging stations just like gas stations across the country. And it'll be a whole lot easier to own one car and have it be an electric. So that I only just want to mention briefly here the third potential and last drawback possibly of electric cars, and that's battery life, which Ruth Yeiser alluded to. Like all lithium-ion batteries, the ones on electric cars really do last a long time. I think you can go, well, you'll see that you can go very far and for a long time with an electric battery. They don't last forever though, and replacing an electric car battery can be expensive. Nissan charges $5,499 to replace a battery pack in a Leaf once it's out of warranty. But fortunately, every electric car maker has at least an 8-year, 100,000-mile warranty on their batteries. And they did this for a reason, two reasons actually. One is that they have great confidence in their batteries and know that they're going to last a long time because they're actually very simple, like a battery in anything else. And second, because they know that people are not going to want to buy electric cars if they're going to have to replace the batteries at $5,000 or $6,000. So 8 years, 100,000 miles. So you'll only have to pay that replacement price if your battery fails after that warranty period of 8 years, 100,000 miles. The Leaf has been in mass production longer than any other electric car, and the vast majority of even the 2010 Nissan Leaf is the vast majority are still on their first battery. Several owners have posted online that they've driven more than 150,000 miles on their original batteries. When electrics first came out, nobody knew how long the batteries would last because they were new. But 11 years later, in 2021, that issue seems to be settled. The batteries now last at least as long as the car itself. And here is a minute-and-a-half testimonial from someone who can testify to that. And Ruth was going to bring that up. And if you can start it at 40 seconds, that's great.
My name's Shannon Monroe. I live in Bellevue, Washington, and I have owned this Nissan Leaf since 2010. I was one of the first Nissan Leaf owners. I stayed up till midnight to order this car. We had it delivered to Florida. We were the first one registered in the state of Florida. And it's been such a great car, we've kept it with us for the last 10 years. We're at about 125,000 Nissan EV miles at this point. We've taken it from Florida to California and now up here to Washington.
We decided as a couple that we wanted to try to use this car with our child exclusively.
We took him home from the hospital in the electric car, and as soon as my parents realized we were that committed to it, they went out and bought a Nissan Leaf as well. That was another great moment that we made that transition for someone else. So he could ride in their car and our car. It's been really easy to have this car over the last 10 years. There's no real maintenance costs. There's been no trips to the dealership.
It's a great feeling to know that for 10 years I haven't had to purchase gasoline, I haven't contributed to those emissions.
And we drive this thing every single day. My wife drives it to work, we drive the kids to school in it, we take the kids to Taekwondo practice in it. It's our daily car. We're excited to see what Nissan's coming up with next, because once you've had a Nissan electric car, you're really not going to look at anything else. There's no going back once you've had a Nissan EV.
All right, well, thank you. I'm sure the Nissan ad department was happy to hear from that couple, but I do have to say that our own experience with our Nissans has been pretty comparable. So I realized, oops, there we go again. So to wrap things up, and thank you, I'm really sorry that we've gone a little overtime here, but I am finishing up now. So the last slide is the pros and cons of electric cars, just summarizing what we've already talked about. And that is really the end of my presentation. So does anyone have any final questions about anything we've talked about today?
Sure, I have a comment. Yesher Koch, first of all, wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you, Rabbi.
And I think, one of the things is not just two things about your title. One is why you'll soon be doing, and one is, that we're not actually probably gonna have a choice much longer because there is a transition going on in societally, and that's important as well. But the other thing is, and this is maybe more looking toward a future session, is my not an issue, but the thing about the title, why you'll soon be driving an electric car, my issue is maybe that it will soon be why you'll soon be riding in an electric car, because I think that most cars will be self-driven before too long as well. So we'll be chauffeured in our self-driving electric cars within just a couple of years as well.
Well, thank you. And of course, the rabbi is always a step ahead of us here. And but I do think that that's true. And of course, you could also say that there are self-driving, there are electric bicycles out there. And I know that there are buses. I know that there are trains. There are lots of ways that this is going to go. And it has to go that way because it's certainly better for the environment, but it's also, I'm hoping you're seeing here that it's also not something to lament, but something to actually embrace. And I've put my own contact information in the chat box, and if you're ever just curious and want to take a leaf around the block sometime, I would be happy to accommodate you, because I realize that this is a bit of a change, and but I think it's going to be a good one.
Lee, just a quick point. As I've been reading along on Google, looking if I want to purchase a vehicle of this type, the interesting point that a couple of manufacturers made is they're now designing electric cars from the ground up. In other words, they're building it as an electric car as opposed to using a stock body that used to be a gasoline vehicle. So that's another thing to look at, is whether the technology is being used in construction is from the ground up, much like Tesla. And I think Kia now is advertising their latest vehicle as being from the ground up, designed as an electric vehicle.
Well, that's nice to know. And I do know, I didn't know that, but I do know that these batteries are very recyclable, and that there are people out there who have made a business of taking old electric car battery packs and powering homes with them, and powering data centers for very energy intensive computing. So that's a nice thing too.
I just wanted to add, Lee, so when our 2006 Prius, when the battery did go out on us, the car was drivable. It's just that all the lights in the dashboard, every conceivable light in the dashboard was lit to indicate there was a problem, but it was drivable. There are companies that will actually come to your house and replace the battery in the driveway. Recognize that these batteries are not one battery, but there are many batteries that are connected on a common rail. So there may be 33 or 32, let's say, separate batteries in the case of Prius. And if only one cell is not coming up quite right, the car is going to indicate there's a battery problem. And so for you, basically those cells are about $30 a piece. Not saying that anybody would want to change them because it requires some technical skill and safety equipment, but they are, you know, there are many services now that will actually come and change the batteries in your driveway. So you don't even have to go to a service station.
That's great to hear. And I did hear that, I did read actually that AAA has a pilot program where they have portable battery rechargers, not just for your conventional battery, but to power your entire car. So if something goes wrong, you can, you know, call AAA. I don't know if they're available yet, but they're certainly that certainly is going to happen soon, and so that also gives you some peace of mind.
Yeah, and there's also for people who are worried about winter driving, there are more all-wheel drive options available now than there were a few years ago, which is an important thing.
Yes. All right. Anyone else want to mention anything?
I have one more question. So what's the impact of the like air conditioning on the battery? Like, does that play into how many miles you can actually cover in a car? I would assume it is, but just kind of curious.
Yeah, when you have the air conditioning on, it'll say on the dash, say you have 112 miles of range left, it might drop to 106 miles of range temporarily while you have the air conditioning on. So yes, everything like that drops it a little bit while you're using it. I mean, it doesn't affect the lights, for example, because they don't draw much power, but something like the air conditioning, it does affect a little bit.
And I have a question.
Amy, yes.
So have you tried long distances in your car? Like you drive 200 miles, you stop and charge, drive 200 miles, stop and charge, drive 200 miles and stay at a hotel. I mean, how cumbersome is that?
I personally have to say I haven't done that because we are fortunate enough that my wife has a conventional car, and when we've taken long trips, we have used that. I know thousands of people have done this. There was even 10 years ago, I remember that there was someone who went across the country going from charging station to charging station just to prove that it could be done. So now it's a whole lot easier than it was 10 years ago. They have these stations, as Art Lebowski said, they're all over the place now, many in the Phoenixville area, but also all across the country. If you look at the interactive maps that I have put in the chat, they'll give you an idea of how ubiquitous these charging stations are, but also you do, to be realistic though, you do have to, it might take you a half an hour to charge at these stations. So that's why they're probably, instead of being located in the future like gas stations are at just standalone places with maybe a convenience store nearby, you're more likely to see them at restaurants where you might actually spend an hour while your car is charging. But it's certainly being done by many people, but I personally have not done it.
And are they, do you see them along the Pennsylvania Turnpike at the service plazas?
Yes, every service plaza, my understanding is now, I looked on the map and I only looked to see if the one at King of Prussia and the one at Downingtown, is it, I think, had them. But yes, they do have chargers there.
Okay.
Ask if this.
Ruth, I have a question for you. How many times do you need to recharge when you go to Arcadia National Park?
Our car is a hybrid, so we fill up at the gas station.
Ah, okay.
But but Chuck's new Prius, the new hybrid that he just bought, which doesn't even have a spare tire. I guess that was to save on weight or whatever. He said he's getting about 65 miles per gallon now.
So that's what a hybrid will do. So you'll have the backup, yeah. But if it's 100%, yeah, Irina would have to be 100% electric car, I guess, to answer that question. But Ruth, do you know how many miles roughly it is to Acadia in Maine?
625.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Now, we do know people who come up on a Tesla, so people do it, just down the street, we have a car museum just down the street. They have a charging station. So, it's doable. It's just something that at our point in our lives, I'm not willing to wait at a charging station for 45 minutes with the cat in the car to,
And I'll add that the museum down the street has a 100-year-old electric vehicle that they drive around, Abbott, Detroit.
yes.
Or I should
And in fact,
Detroit
that
Electric, sorry.
that original, the original thing that you had, the original slide that you had up, they have that, not that car, but they have that display in the museum, both as part of their electric versus gas and as part of their advertising, as part of an advertising display that they did a couple of years ago.
oh, that's very cool. Well, and to your question, Irene, I get, or Amy, it would be, you'd stop once and charge your car. If you're stopping overnight on your way up to Maine, for example, you'd stop one time and recharge your car, and then you'd be good to go, because that's, what did you say, 600 and what?
625, 630 miles from here.
Yeah. So there are many, many electric cars now that will give you well over 300 miles on a charge. And and as I said, in the next year or two, it'll be, 400 or so. So that is, I can only say that it seems like a much bigger deal than it is.
How safe is it to leave your electric car at a charging station while it's charging?
Oh, you mean you'd have it plugged in and you'd go into the restaurant, for example?
Yes.
Something like that, or stay at a hotel overnight? At least as safe as it would be with any other car. I mean, you'd have your, no one else can start your car but you. And I haven't looked into hot wiring electric cars, but I imagine that it's at least it's kind of challenging to do that. And I think some people, at least at this point, if they're planning on stealing a car, the last one they choose to take would be an electric. So I think we'd be okay there. Any other questions or thoughts?
Well, you've
Sorry, go ahead.
You've mentioned batteries a lot, but I read a lot in the publications that I look at that, down the road, we're talking about hydrogen fuel cells to replace the batteries. That's
also something that is certainly being researched. So we're heading in a direction where gas-powered cars are probably not going to be around that long. And it's hard to imagine that now, because that's what the vast majority of people are driving. But it's just, if the car makers, and they certainly have, that made this decision all around the world, they're not doing it just for the environment. They're doing it because they realize that, practically speaking, whether it's because laws are going to be passed or whether it's because it just makes more sense economically, people are going to start driving electric cars, and maybe there'll be hydrogen fuel cell cars, and maybe there'll be something else. But right now, the electric technology is the one that's the most fully advanced and the one that's most mainstream. So that's where we're heading. Anything else before we get going? Again, I apologize, but I appreciate people for hanging in there, and thank you. And thanks again to Ruth Yeiser, our facilitator and IT specialist. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you so
Lee,
much.
thank you. That was really fascinating.
Really helpful.
Thank you, Lee.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for tuning in.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.